I see posts all the time on like Facebook and TikTok and whatnot, like talking about wanting to learn how to ride a motorcycle but being a little scared or nervous about it. And so I figured I'd make a little short video on how to actually start riding a motorcycle. I'm not going to be able to go into everything in this short video, but if you guys like it, let me know and I'll keep making some more. Bike off. Always turn it on. And depending on your bike, you'll have different indicators. My neutral indicator is here. So when I put the bike into neutral, you can see it flash. That means that it's free rolling. I can roll it around. A lot of people will either start their bike in neutral or in gear with the clutch pulled, and it starts. That's how you start the motorcycle, but you want to ride it. This little lever here is your gear shift indicator, or your gear shifter. So pulling the clutch in and dropping it down into first or up into second, third, fourth, fifth. In order to get started on a motorcycle, there's a few ways of doing it. You give gas and then you let off the clutch until the bike starts moving. And you can do that. You can also just start letting off the clutch, but you don't get enough power and you start getting a little bit kind of wobbly. With your foot not pressing the brake, you can see how the brake gets pressed. That's for your rear brake, and this is your front brake. Without pressing the rear brake, but just covering it, like my foot's on it but not pushing it down, it's not turning on my brake lights or anything. You can get started by giving a little bit of throttle so you're not at idle. You can hear the RPMs pick up. And then you let out your clutch slowly and you'll feel the clutch start to grab. And once you feel it start to grab, pull it back in until it stops. And you can feel the bike kind of moving under its own power. And that's the friction zone. That's where the bike starts to have pressure applied to the clutch by the motor and applies it to the transmission to rotate a belt. But a lot of motorcycles will have a chain, or some Hondas will have like a shaft, etc. But essentially, so you start applying some gas, you start letting off the clutch, and eventually you start feeling that point where it takes off, and you can go real slow like this. Make sure nobody's coming. So we're not going fast at all, but this is how you ride at a low speed. Now to brake, you gently pull in the clutch, gently pull on the brake lever, and then you repeat the process. So you see, I'm not pressing the clutch at all, and I'm barely turning the throttle. This is how easy I'm like barely turning it, and we're moving. We're not leaving first gear or anything like that yet. Simple, 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 simple. So now we're making some little turns. So we're cruising around in first, and we wanna turn. Depending on your speed, you'll use the handlebars in different. The bike turns under 10 miles an hour by turning the handlebars. So when I turn the handlebars left, the bike goes left. When I turn the handlebars right, the bike goes right. When you're above that speed, once you start getting some movement and momentum, instead of turning the bars, leaning, it becomes your method of turning at that point. So here we're turning the bars. We start getting to a point where we're picking up speed and we can start leaning the bike. If you want to lean the bike on the left side so the left goes down, at higher speeds you start to push this forward and you pull this backwards. So this comes back, this goes forward, and that makes the bike lean that direction. And the opposite is true. If you're turning right at its speed, you push the right handlebar forward and pull the left back towards you. There's a lot of physics behind that, but essentially a motorcycle is a big old gyroscope, and it wants to stay upright at speed. And so in order to counteract that, to have the angular momentum take it in a different direction, you have to apply the force that causes that gyroscope to be overcome. See, we're pushing, and that causes us to turn. So we've got starting and stopping, and we've got the general idea of turning down. I don't know if this parking lot is fair game or not, but we're only going to use it for a minute. So once you get up to whatever speed you need to shift at, and it'll usually sound like the bike's getting a little bit stressed. So right now it's at idle. It stays at idle when the clutch is pulled in or whenever it's in neutral. So it stays there until you start letting the clutch out. See it starting to drop, you hear it starting to drop. And it's starting to pull me forward. But essentially, if that gets too low, what'll happen, the bike will stall. So your goal is to keep that above that stall point while also having power to maneuver the motorcycle. So you restart it, and then once you get the bike starting to move, like we're kind of moving now, we can start, once we clear this debris on the road, of course. So we're starting to move. We apply throttle, and we're to a point where it's feeling like it wants to shift. It's starting to get a little bit angry. Pull the clutch in at the same time as pushing up on the shift lever with your foot. And I'll show it again. So you pull the clutch in, shift lever up, and then let the clutch out while you're rolling on the throttle. If you feel the bike starting to kind of shake and judder when you're doing that, you're in too high of a gear. And to shift down, it's the exact opposite direction for the lever. So instead of flipping it up, you flip it down. So you still pull in the clutch, let off the throttle, and then push down. And as you let off the clutch past that friction point, you apply a little bit of throttle, and it starts taking off again. And that's essentially how you move at speed. And we're only moving 30 right now, and that's completely true no matter how fast you're going. If your bike is starting to, they call it lugging, if it's starting to lug and like it's about to, feels like it's about to die on you, then you want to shift down. You also want to shift down when making turns, because you want to be able to come out of the turn at the appropriate gear. And a lot of, especially slow speed turning, is done solely by using the clutch and appropriate throttle while you turn. If you need to brake while doing it, gently applying some rear brake is sometimes okay, but it's not ideal. And as you can hear now, the bike's kind of chugging. That's the lugging that I explained. So it don't like doing that. And so the appropriate way to do this would be to pull in the clutch until you get back to the friction zone and utilize that friction zone to keep the RPMs high enough. And then you can modulate that throttle while you're doing it. I'm applying rear brake now with the clutch being disengaged partially, but not fully disengaged, because I'm making a U-turn. Now normally you look where you want the bike to go. Essentially, if you get well acquainted with your motorcycle enough, depending on your bike and the type of motorcycle you have, you can often do really slow speed things, like navigating a parking lot like this. And I'm doing this solely by modulating between the clutch the throttle, and a tiny bit of rear brake when I'm overshooting it a bit to help it come back in, or if I'm undershooting it to help stabilize it. The rear brake is just to stabilize. But essentially now you know how to, at least from the basics, operate a motorcycle. But I guess for the rest of the video, we'll just take a little night ride. We've done some low speed maneuvers. Practice for me as much as it is an explanation for y'all, so. My turn. So here's an indication of how the bike wants to just stay upright while it's moving. It's not that I'm an excellent balancer. The bike balances. I just sit on it. A little bit, get some cool air blowing in. My visor's real dirty though. I might want to stop so I can actually clean it off. Cool. Well, I don't think you'll be able to see too much from here, so I'm gonna call it a night. I appreciate y'all taking the time to learn how to ride a motorcycle with me. I'm not a great teacher. Teaching is not my forte, but I've been riding since about 2016. Got about 7, almost 8 years under my belt on a motorcycle, thousands of miles. So if I can impart any knowledge, make sure to follow, like, subscribe, click the thing, do the needful, and check out some of the other stuff. And I'll see you in the next one.